Robertstown in the middle of Ireland is where we collected the Charles Whitten. She's a rescue lifeboat, nearly 100 years old, making her last voyage down to the sea so that she can become an exhibit in a museum. The journey was getting more difficult by the day. The last stretch of river, the last lateral canal and lock, before the tideway at St. Mullins, and a new set of challenges. The Charles has survived being left high and dry by the tide, but her engine and rudder are quite unable to fight the speed and power of the currents. Instead of using force, I have to use cunning, work with the river, not against it. It's a bit like skippering a piece of driftwood. Other rivers are more predictable. They start off as rapid torrents and then gradually slow down and broaden out as they meet the lowlands. The Barrow's different. Just as it becomes a large and mature river, it enters a gorge and speeds up. The speed of the river current combines with the ebb tide, which reaches many miles inland, to give a roller coaster ride through powerful scenery. We have been in the wilderness, in a gorge that feels as remote as the upper Amazon. But there are signs that civilization is approaching again. New Ross in County Wexford is the most inland port in Ireland. Its maritime traditions go back a long way, and the Shortall brothers possess a remarkable record of a time and a place where commercial traffic on the inland waterways met commercial ocean shipping. The past and present are an interlace. The distinctions blur. It happens so often when you travel these waterways. Dick Carney is one of the old breed of commercial boatsmen. He's making a landfall in yesterday. Paddy Shortall recently returned from a lifetime working in England. He and his brother Frank, who'd remained in New Ross, started to explore an attic full of junk. They came across a couple of suitcases that had belonged to another brother, Robert, who had died 12 years before. Suitcases that were full of treasure. When they opened them, out poured a flood of memory with a sad, sweet smell. Robert, dead but not forgotten.
He'd climb trees, he'd get pictures from any angle. He'd go out of his way to get good shots and, you know, no rubbish.
Now in November 1941, he got a job in the Coliseum Cinema in Waterford. And he was with that cinema until it closed 24 years later. Not only a projectionist, but a perfectionist at his work. That's the where his heart and soul was wrapped up in this work.
Well, it was mainly his job, his only job, but he spent a lot of his time, then his spare time was spent on the river, in the boats and the schooners, and the canal barges mostly. And we got to know a lot of the canal men, the boatmen, and we've done a lot of going up and down from here to Waterford and St. Mullins and Craig and Clashganny and these places, and that became his hobby, and taking photos. And he took thousands of them. This one is July 51.
Yeah, Matty died.
Yeah, well, Matty, he unloaded most of the barges in his time. And he got £1 a ton for unloading them. That was the wages. Yeah. You took out 20 ton, you got £1. You were a millionaire. We were only kids on the river then. I was only 12. You know, 10 and 12 going up and down that river. It was a good place to hide from school, though. Nobody knew where you was. You couldn't be found. They'd never suspect you'd been on the river. You go down to Waterford in one boat and go back on another while school was over, and you just put in an appearance. He got in then to movie cameras. He lived for that. He went everywhere. He went to Moscow, he went all over the world, everywhere.
That was his sole interest. He had no interest whatsoever in anything else.
The money went on films, and that was it. Nothing else. He never went with a woman, he never drank, he never smoked. That was his life.
You see, the people who were in those films, they're gone, they're not around. The boats are gone. The men who worked on the quays, they're gone, and poor Robert, the man who filmed it all, is gone. So this is why this is so precious to us, and we want to pass it on to posterity.
I'm going to take a break from the past and a break from the job in hand. I'm going to explore the River Nore, the second of the 3 sister rivers who share this estuary, on a floating restaurant, with somebody else doing the driving. What more could you ask for on a fine evening? Around here somewhere, on the eastern shore, lives a self-sufficient man who is my hero. The lessons he taught me were learned a long time ago.
Well, I suppose really it was that I went to Africa when I was 20, and I lived in places in Africa where, you know, you had to go 100 miles or so, or 200 or 300 miles sometimes, to go to a shop of any kind. And we produced our own food. If you didn't produce it yourself, you didn't get any. And then after the war, I came back to England, where I emanated from, and I just couldn't bring myself to this sort of pop round to the shop for an egg attitude. And I got a little bit of land. We got a cow, and of course once you get a cow, Everything else follows because you have too much milk, so you have to get pigs to consume some of the milk products. You have to make butter and cheese and yogurt and all that sort of stuff. And then the cow produces a hell of a lot of manure besides milk, and so you have to dig up more land to absorb all the manure and to grow the food for the cow and the pigs that you've now got and the poultry, which inevitably come along. And we produced all our own food. I could see I think it was the Blackstairs Mountains from the hill behind my farm on very, very rare occasions. You could just see it over the ocean, you could just see these hills. And so having seen that, you have to come over and you know, find the reality behind it. We live almost within spitting distance of the Barrow, the tidal Barrow. It's quite wide here. I should think it must be nearly half a mile wide here. And it's very good soil, well drained, fertile. We're trying to do the same thing here, really, and we've got a pretty productive garden and an orchard over there, and we've got a few pigs. I wrote several books about producing your own food. One was called The Fat of the Land, and it was really a story of how we got into it. And then there was the complete book of self-sufficiency, which sold it's still selling all over the world. It's in 16 different languages now. And I always had letters from people from all over the world. They read this book, can we come on your farm and learn something? And so we decided, all right, let them come. And they come for 10 days. We never have more than 6 people. And we teach them what we know.
John Seymour influenced me and influenced a whole generation. His books literally changed my life. There aren't many people I could say that about. I didn't meet him till quite recently, when he was over 70. But age certainly hasn't diminished the vital force of his down-to-earth intelligence. We're in a tide wave with a buoyed channel used by merchant shipping. It's added a new scale to our journey. The Charles seemed a big boat back in the canal. Now she seems very small indeed. The estuary is taking on truly grand proportions. What impresses me most is a rail bridge open to let the little Charles through. It seems almost like a salute. We've come down the tidal River Barrow, past the junction with the Nore and into New Ross. We've pressed on to Cheek Point. I pull in for the night and write up the logbook. The lunar light of the oil lamp casts evocative shadows. But the job is done rapidly because, according to Foxhall rumour, Tommy Hayes will be performing tonight in Mead's pub, and they say he's the finest bodhrán player in the world.
Family is the frame drum, which is a drum which the diameter of the skin is bigger than the rim. That's the technical definition of a frame drum. And you get frame drums all over the world. But the only difference with the bodhrán is the fact that it's played with a double-ended stick. So most of the traditions either one-sided or they play with their hands. I've seen ones made out of greyhound skin. I've seen them made out of donkey skin. I had one made out of donkey skin. Pig skin, whatever, you know, but the basic is goat skin, you know, a good goat skin. My personal preference is for a 2-year-old female goat because it's a much lighter skin. With a really light skin, I can vary my pitch. With a thick skin, I couldn't do that, you know. I play a lot of different types of music. I don't just play Irish music. I mean, I play jazz. I do some classical work. You know, I do a lot of different music. I do some solo stuff. I do writing. So for me, it's a much more open instrument than strictly a traditional Irish instrument. And I've also been exposed to Arabic drumming, which I'm totally enamored with, what I have been for many years. Indian drumming, all those different cultures. So I see it in a totally different context than in just Irish. Irish music doesn't have enough rhythm or doesn't have enough of that like drum culture. I think it did have, but I think it's been lost. And I don't know who to blame for it, but I think it has been lost. It seems to be coming back. I mean, there's a lot more bodhrán players, and there's a lot more good bodhrán players in the last 5-10 years, you know.
At Cheek Point, we should turn to port and make for the open sea. But instead, I put the wheel to starboard and head up the River Suir for Waterford, capital city of the southeast. Waterford is another important port. So, for the first time on the whole journey, we're meeting traffic problems. The blue monster leaves my nerves singing like a Bowron skin, but the Charles just rolls happily in its wash. She's a remarkable boat. She takes all these changes in her long-skirted Victorian stride. The company of merchant shipping, strange to me, is well within her social skills. She makes the tideway her salon and leaves me feeling gauche and clumsy. Waterford's a city I like. It has character and culture. It's the oldest town in Ireland and respects its own tradition.
Oh, it's absolutely vital to the life of a place like Waterford to have a live theatre. Yeah, because it's the hub of all the social and cultural activity in the city and has been for the last 200 odd years. Our base would be the local amateur societies. We have 5 musical societies, two dramatic societies. At tops of the town competition, there'll be 5 or 6 variety groups in the town could be competing in that. 2 pantomime societies. So we're quite adequately catered for the amateur scene. And then we do get the professional touring companies and have been all through the history of the place, actually.
Katie Grew, Cecily McKenna.
Theatre is allegedly haunted. And there have been a few reports of sightings, but as I say, I've never seen a sober person that saw a ghost.
Talking of sober people and of ghosts, I have another cultural shrine I want to find before I untie the Charles and leave this ancient city. The journey is a quest, and I've heard rumours of a holy grail. Somewhere, in a street back from the river, is the well-kept secret of Number 9.
Henry Downes' family were a very successful family of merchants in Bristol, and Waterford being a leading port in what was the British Empire, it was a suitable place to open tea, wine and spirits store. And he came here in 1797 and started the company. Tea was a major part of business in those days and very important. And the spirits would have been the third most important, because the import of ports, sherries, etc. from the continent was very major. He was a bachelor, so the family name didn't continue. It came through my grandmother to ourselves. Over the years, we became a very large, the largest bonders in the southeast of Ireland, and we used to have 10 different blends of whiskey along the bar here. The Downes Number 9 became the most popular one because the parish priests, who knew more about drinking whiskey than anybody else, used to come in, and if the parish priest wanted it, it had to be the best, so everybody had to have the Downes Number 9. The others became sort of obsolete.
But the real secret is not upstairs in the pub. It's in the cellars beneath. That's where the alchemy of whiskey blending is carried out, away from prying eyes. I'll become an industrial spy.
The Number 9, we're trying to keep it going as a 200-year tradition. These things must never be let slip, I feel. And we blend it in a small way just to keep the name going and to keep the quality of the name up to what it should be.
Deadly Australians introduces us to some of the less likeable creatures that